to go ahead and get started with a few announcements. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being with us here today at the Silver City Museum. It's actually my office in the museum. This is a fake background, just pretend. But it is this beautiful here, as it usually is. So we're very lucky to be living in this portion of the country. And I want to thank you all for coming out for our Unpacking Silver. This series is funded by the New Mexico Humanities Council, and also with support from our partners at WIL, that's Western Institute for Lifelong Learning. We have our representative from WIL, Alan Reagan, and I'll introduce you here a little bit later. And I just want to give you a little background. This series, this is your first of attendance, and we have, this is our third of the series of 7 conversations. And they all cover a different theme related to Silver City and Grant County. We did some surveys and a lot of feedback from audiences and research, and came up with 7 themes that we thought were the most important to our community here in Silver. And then we found some of the best local scholars that we have, and you can see them here. There they are. There's the other ones. And they'll be talking to us a little bit more later. And we got these 7 scholars, we call them our 7 samurais, each to go into their area of expertise and do a different presentation on a different theme. This series goes on throughout the summer, and I am very, very happy that you guys are able to be with us here today, and that we are able to continue the long, successful streak that we have had. Before we get started, I want to remind everybody that we are, the Silverstein Museum Society is a nonprofit that is supported programs like this free to the public, but any donation that you can make is welcome and thank you. You can do that at www.silversteinmuseumsociety.org/virtual tip jar. We have with us today a virtual superstar in local history. You've probably heard of her, you've probably seen her book, and there's a good chance that if you're at all interested in local history, that you've seen one of her lectures, papers, something, because she has been around for a long time in this community. 27 years she served as the director of the Silver City Museum and developed important resources for historical research, helped the museum become one of the smallest institutions to achieve accreditation, co-authored the book Built to Last, An Architectural History of Silver City. And all of this started when, over a decades-long process of indexing Silver City's earliest newspapers and historic photographs a long, long time ago. And throughout the years, she has just built up research and garnered award and recognition, one thing after another. She was given the Lifetime Achievement Award from the New Mexico Historic Preservation Division in 2010 and was profiled as an Old West savior by True West magazine. So she may have some stuff to talk about. All right. And with that, I bring you Miss Susan Berry.
In all the pandemic excitement last year, Silver City's 150th birthday in May of 2020 managed to slip by unnoticed. It's a good time to ask why the town has not just survived, but thrived for a century and a half, when so many other promising mining camps disappeared. At this point, I'll need to go share a screen. And it looks like the right thing has appeared. Although, let's see, can you double click that to make it all be big? Let's see what happens. It's on the left. If you click the one that's
Oh,
highlighted
okay,
on the
yeah.
on the bar, not. Oh yeah, play. That's it. That's it. There we go. I see what we need to see. The San Vicente Cienega, a marshy spring-fed valley, has attracted people as long as humans have been in this region. It was said to be a favorite camping spot for Cochise Apaches. Early in 1869, the future location of Silver City is taken up by a handful of Pinos Altos miners under a preemption claim. They build small cabins and raise crops, protected by a guard detail from Fort Bayard. I'll note here that although that is one of the original cabins, the photograph dates from 1928, when it was riding on the back of a parade float. The Apaches considered the Cienega a resource worth fighting for, and killed the wife and child of one of these men in a rare unguarded moment. In May 1870, several Pinos Altos miners ride over to Ralston, later known as Shakespeare, to check out a reported silver discovery. On seeing the mineral there, John Bullard exclaims, "Say it with me, if that's silver ore, I know where there's plenty of it." He was right. Within 2 weeks, ore is sampled near the springs and assayed, claims are located, and the miners gather to organize the Silver Flat mining district, and they name their new town Silver City. Prospectors pour in from throughout the region. A surveyor lays out a town site in a neat grid, ignoring prevailing drainage patterns. Unlike older Hispanic towns in New Mexico, the plan does not include a plaza. The founders are all accustomed to frontier life, and their desire for a permanent settlement is strong. They will defy Western stereotype, going to great lengths to establish local government and the ability to levy taxes. The 1870 US Census, taken when Silver City is just 3 months old, shows 80 residents, 68 Anglo, 11 Hispanic, and 1 Black. The demographics will soon shift heavily to the Hispanic side. Town founder John Bullard is killed in a battle with Apaches 9 months after leading his companions to the Bonanza site. He was 29. Brick clay is located nearby, and David Abraham erects the first brick building in 1871. 3 other merchants, Isaac Cohen, the Bennett brothers, and H.M. Porter, waste no time putting up brick stores of their own. This early commitment to solid construction sets a course for a well-built town that is able to weather both natural and economic disasters. This is the earliest known view of Silver City, taken around December 1872. That month, a visitor writes, "I was astonished to find a large town with many good houses, 4 large 2-story brick stores, streets wide and regular, numerous families, women and children plenty, together with all the other comforts of life. And yet the first shanty here is not 3 years old. All the improvements here have been paid for by the silver mines in this locality. In this era, public halls attached to saloons are used for dances, church services, traveling entertainers, and district court. They also host the first school classes. Collections are taken up to fund short terms of free public school. Spanish-speaking children learn English. Many of their English-speaking classmates pick up Spanish, including the future Billy the Kid. In the foreground in this photo is the Adobe Smelter complex built by mine owner Juan Nepomuceno Carrasco, still in an early stage. It has already produced the town's first bullion. More will be heard about him in future presentations. The smelter, labeled Mexican Furnaces, is at the center of this clip from an 1874 map. At left, a broad area below Spring Street is identified as Chihuahua. Many Adobe houses will be built in the north section of this Hispanic neighborhood below the sharp ascent of what we now know as Chihuahua Hill. Houses on the hill itself are smaller and rougher. Many are built of rock from the hill itself, chained with adobe mud. The St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Church, built by its parishioners over a series of years in the 1870s, is Silver City's largest and most important adobe building. Silver City's American and Mexican residents, as they refer to themselves and each other, are all in it together in the early 1870s. Survival depends on close collaboration and constant vigilance against Apache attack. Virtually everyone attends the local bailes and other events together. Many veterans of the California column who protected the Pinos Altos gold mines in the Civil War settled in the Mesilla Valley and married Hispanic women. A number of these men and their families become early Silver City residents. They included Peter and Theodora Ott, owners of the Tremont House Hotel. After Peter Ott's death in 1883, Theodora marries Daniel Hobart. Their son Eddie is seen at lower right, and one of her older daughters from the Ott family is standing next to her. The Hobarts acquire the former H.B. Ailman House, which of course is now home to the museum, in 1893, and they lived there longer than the Ailman family did. Many more cross-cultural marriages will take place in Silver City's early years. Flood problems on Main Street, the primary business location, start early, as you can see by all the strewn rocks. A large adobe building on this block collapsed in 1875. According to the account, it fell with a thud. Numbers 2 and 3 on this photo are standing, they're newer buildings standing on the spot. Many downtown merchants install breakwaters, these kind of low stone walls, to keep floodwater out of their businesses, although sometimes it would direct the water onto someone else's business. The opening of a rich silver deposit in the 76 mine and chloride flat triggers a new rush of fortune hunters and hangers-on. The boom has begun. After 6 years of effort, Silver City receives its charter from the territorial legislature in 1878, granting autonomous government to the town. The charter provides for election of local officials, but also places responsibility on the shoulders of its citizens. All able-bodied men are required to donate up to 3 days of labor on the streets each year or have to pay a fine. And at long last, local taxes can be collected, making New Mexico's first publicly funded school system a reality. An actual schoolhouse will be a few years off. Silver City's footprint is expanding. The North Addition, which the locals call the flat above town, was added to the original town site in the 1870s, but for many years, its main feature was the local cemetery. In 1882, the graves are dug up and their occupants reinterred several miles north of town in what is now Memory Lane Cemetery. The North Addition, which was platted with generously sized blocks and lots, is now prime real estate, and several large houses are built there. At the south end of town, houses on Chihuahua Hill are gradually enlarged and improved. More adobe construction is starting to appear in this neighborhood. In line with Mexican building tradition, the houses are set against the street edge with the more protected spaces at the back of the lot. As Silver City grows, much is made of its character as a so-called American town. Now, the unspoken implication is not Mexican. Downtown businesses are now almost entirely in the hands of Anglo men. More Anglo women arrive and take a lead in developing the school, a reading room, churches, and the local hospital, about which you will learn more in a future presentation. A decade in, early buildings are being repurposed. The Bennett store on Hudson Street is converted into the Southern Hotel. Perhaps there are some in the audience who may remember the Southern Hotel. I wish I had known it. Variety theaters, an opera house, a skating rink, and soda fountains offer diversions, and townspeople are entertained by Mexican circuses, tightrope walkers, and balloon ascensions. The Fort Bayard Band often performs at local events. Flooding is a continual problem. A stone dam and breakwater have been built across the foot of Main Street in the hope of protecting the buildings above Spring Street. 1883 is one of the most eventful years in all of Silver City history, starting with another rich discovery of silver. The railroad finally arrives that May, and this is the occasion where it was celebrated and a silver spike was driven. There was unprecedented construction around this time. A large convent school run by the Sisters of Mercy. This is located on the present site of the 6th Street School. A courthouse is under construction at the head of Broadway. And the local schoolhouse has just been completed. I've noticed that every child in this photo is wearing a hat. A 3-story addition transforms the old Exchange Hotel into the fabulous Timmer House with 105 guest rooms, an elevator, and electric call bells. A 2-story addition is made to the old hotel, the Tremont House, the one that the Otts were the proprietors of. The old Cohen store is remade to house the Grant County Bank. And on the corner of Bullard and Broadway, C.P. Crawford's new bank is taking shape. Its vault was said to be the finest in the territory. And an unofficial red light district forms around the corner of Texas and Spring Streets. This is an early 1900s view, but toward the front, toward the left of the front, you may see a house with 2 bay windows. That was Kate Stewart's place. And the house to its right was another part of the red light district. On the corner, if you kind of go a little to the right and up, is a large building that was the Orient Hotel, later known as the Majestic Hotel. Before that was built, many other cribs and other red light houses were located in that spot, and more proceed down Spring Street toward Bullard. The boom ends abruptly when both of the new banks failed toward the end of 1883. I believe the Crawford Bank hadn't even opened yet. In 1885, a small Adobe chapel known as La Capilla is built on the western summit of Chihuahua Hill by the Manquero sisters as a gift for their neighbors, and it will be the scene of many religious celebrations through the years. The Silver City Waterworks, a private business operating under a town franchise, is completed in 1887. In this photo, I direct your attention to the stacks of firewood at the right being used to fuel the boiler. The surrounding hills you may see are rather bare, and note the absence of the arroyo that now runs behind this building. After a 2-decade boom, the 1890s will be a time of contraction. A crash in silver value ends silver mining overnight in June 1893. However, Silver City remains a legal, business, and educational hub for the surrounding settlements. It's so well built and so well established that it manages to carry on. And the news isn't all bad. In 1893, the New Mexico Territorial Normal School is established in Silver City through long effort of local leaders. Old Main is the first and for several years the only building on the campus. This is a later photograph taken long after it was built. Nonstop wood harvesting and grazing have left the surrounding hills bare of vegetation. Now, even a small rainfall can produce flooding from the north or west, or often both. County inmates are kept busy repairing the streets, and summer flooding has become so predictable that the annual monsoons are known as the flood season. In July 1895, an epic flood sends 3 feet of rushing water throughout downtown, after which the lower end of Main Street is no longer a viable thoroughfare. Flood damaged structures are torn down and not replaced. The early 20th century rivals the 1880s as a time of growth and rapid change. Silver City is slowly expanding to the east. At the top of this rare view, you can see the start of the Hispanic settlement that in those days was called Sonora Hill or Perros Bravos and is now Brewer Hill. The descriptive term Spanish American is taking the place of Mexican. A local chapter of the Alianza Hispano-Americana is chartered in 1904 and will remain active for many years. This is one of their first activities, a day-long celebration of Mexican Independence Day. Downtown, a small Chinatown has formed on Texas Street above Yankee. A deluge of biblical proportions in August 1902 creates the big ditch as we know it. The gulch grows deeper and wider with every storm. Bridges and dams are built and swept away. The old Timmer House is undermined and demolished. Timely stabilization saves the Warren House, which is today the only surviving original Main Street building. The red light district moves across the ditch into some older houses on Hudson Street, and flooding gradually abates as the watershed is restored on the Gila Forest Reserve, which was started in 1899. Silver City's climate has always made it a destination for health seekers, a fact that was first widely publicized in 1887. But until 1902, there was not a specific place to come and be treated for it. That's when St. Joseph Sanatorium was established. The New Mexico Cottage Sand and many other facilities like it quickly follow. By 1915, health is the town's main economic driver. Promise of a climate cure, because there was no medical cure at that time, brings a remarkable assortment of people to Silver City in search of health. Friends of Theodore Roosevelt, who comes to visit, authors, composers, baseball magnates, politicians, heiresses, and many everyday folks from all walks of life. Lasting friendships and more than a few marriages come from interactions with local residents. You'll hear more of this in the upcoming presentation. The automotive era gets off to a start in the early 1900s, and much road maintenance is actually done by the local automobile owners. Silver City gets its first major update in 2 decades, including the cement sidewalks installed downtown and in some residential areas. New buildings are added to the normal school campus. Many modest-sized houses are built in the north and west parts of town at this time, and dependable electrical and telephone services put into place. With the loss of Main Street, Broadway grows in importance. A fortress-like armory anchors its east end in 1909, and many of the new buildings are clad in decorative metal facades. A modern school building replaces the historic schoolhouse in 1910. And the sewer system is also built that year, and many residents take the opportunity to install indoor plumbing. The sewer line does not extend to Chihuahua Hill. And here we pause for a brief moment to acknowledge New Mexico statehood's arrival in 1912. New Mission-style Santa Fe Railroad Depot is built in 1915, and this photo is taken soon afterwards. Notice that behind it on the hillside of Chihuahua Hill, many of the houses now have gable roofs, much more substantial than a few years ago. And on the upper right, on the top of the hill, you see the tiny La Capilla, which has gone into some decline and it will soon be demolished. The Lincoln School, a so-called ward school, is built on the western edge of Chihuahua Hill in 1915. The official explanation is that the public school is overcrowded and it's not practical to add to that building. And so this location was, quote, thought to be most convenient for the greater number of children to be accommodated. Lincoln School was an attractive modern building, but the segregation effect is obvious. In 1918, it becomes official. The town is made, or excuse me, the school is made wholly Spanish American. In 1916, downtown streets are paved with concrete. Power lines are buried and ornamental streetlights installed. One postcard view of this scene calls it Silver City's Great White Way. World War I and a subsequent shutdown of area mines drained the momentum of the health era. Cottage Sand, the largest and most successful local sanatorium, is sold in 1929, and its assets are slowly dispersed. However, many health seekers and their families stay on in the area. The Depression and World War II was a time of focus on community needs. Local chapters of the Rotary and Lions Club and the League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, are established. A house on Spring Street is donated for use as a community center, and well-meaning beautification drives lead to widespread planting of Siberian elms that survive all too well. In 1930, the old courthouse is demolished and a new one built, not in that order. New Deal funding brings significant physical improvements. Murals are created for the new courthouse lobby. A post office is built on Broadway in 1935. And Graham Gym and James Stadium and a new high school are added to the campus of what has become the New Mexico State Teachers College. A modern hospital is completed in 1937. It goes through multiple names before finally landing as Hillcrest General Hospital in the early 1950s. The Manville Building, Silver City's first junior high school, is built on the site of the old Lourdes Academy. It is today's 6th Street School. Many large homes from the mining boom era are converted into apartments at this time. Downtown stores are modernized and neon appears. This view shows the El Sol Theater sign on the left and the Silco Theater sign on the right. Construction of the 5-story Murray Hotel in 1938 represents a huge private investment in Silver City's future. The east extension of Pope Street is named Silver Heights Boulevard, and the Pueblo-style Clark Court is built there. Many new homes are going up in Silver Heights. As the community awaits word of local men captured in the Philippines at the start of World War II, a roll of honor listing their names is placed in front of the fire station, which is located in the Ailman House. Names of more servicemen from the area are added as the war proceeds, and a flagpole is placed in the middle of the Bullard Broadway intersection. It was much scarred, the base was much scarred by the time it was removed. And before I leave this title slide, just notice how very tall at the left that flat pole actually was. In the post-war period, there was a much letting off steam in which alcohol features prominently. This view was taken in the Clubhouse Bar one 4th of July, sometime in the early 1950s. After a delay in securing building materials, Silver City's post-war building boom takes off. Lots in the San Vicente subdivision are offered at pre-war prices. The Elgin Block Company begins manufacturing cement blocks, some of which go into the Gila Theater, also North Silver Elementary, now Jose Barrios, and an addition that doubles the size of the Murray Hotel. A town swimming pool is built. The public library is established. The town acquires the old homestead of the Scott family pioneering Black family for a municipal golf course. Scott Park will also include ball fields for regular use by little leaguers and adult players. War surplus buildings find new life on the college campus, where many veterans are using their GI benefits. The school becomes New Mexico Western College in 1949. Miller Library replaces Old Main in 1957. I would just point out the unique Zia Sun symbol clock on the tower. And at the top are speakers from when the Carillon system that still plays on the quarter hour, although it went many years without doing that in between then and now. A series of new white campus buildings, all white brick, quickly follow Miller Library, including the quirky Student Union building that everyone knew as the Cooler. The campus becomes Western New Mexico University in 1963. By the early 1960s, roughly a quarter of students at Western are Hispanic, and many will become teachers and principals in the area. Hispanics are increasingly elected to elected office, and bilingual education is incorporated into the local school curriculum, but overall change in the status quo is slow to arrive. The automotive era is in high gear. The railroad depot at the south end of Bullard is shuttered in 1955 when passenger and express service to Silver City is ended. All goods will now arrive by truck. Parking meters and highway scale streetlights are installed downtown. 200 residential blocks are paved in 1959 and 60. Central, now Santa Clara, and Silver City are joined with a 4-lane highway that ends abruptly at College Avenue. This ad, I must say, I clipped from I believe it was a 1953 annual from Western. Small shopping centers, filling stations, drive-ins, and car dealerships appear along Pope Street and Silver Heights Boulevard. The hospital is remodeled and its entrance is moved around the back for better vehicle access and parking. The Southern Hotel is raised in 1961. The Drifter Motel, built 2 years later, is the first to offer a swimming pool. 1967 is dense with key developments. It could rival 1883 for an incredibly full year. Phelps Dodge announces it will resume mining at Tyrone. Silver High School, overwhelmed with baby boomers, runs classes in split sessions, while a new high school, this is an artist's conception, is completed at the upper part of town. The old school building on 6th Street is leveled. New subdivisions and trailer parks explode in every direction. Santa Rita is demolished and many houses are moved into Silver City. $1 million fine arts complex nears completion on the WNMU campus. It's a large auditorium equipped to handle major performances. The Silver City Museum opens in the Ailman House with little fanfare, sharing space with the fire department. The town celebrates its centennial in 1970 with locals dressed in old-timey garb every Friday. The town's first master plan is completed, sparking much controversy over zoning, and the historic houses in the recently closed red light district are demolished, ending the frontier era exactly 100 years after the town's founding. New nonprofits, including the Humane Society and Border Area Mental Health Services, are founded in the 1970s. Native son Harrison Schmidt visits the moon in 1972 and becomes a US Senator 4 years later. Jeff Bingaman, another Silver City native, will succeed him in 1983. The Indian Hills development grows north of town. Solar houses start to appear. La Plata Middle School and Harrison Schmidt Elementary are built. The WNMU Museum opens its doors, and the Silver City Food Co-op is founded. Demolition of the old depot, which was at .60 years old, but the last 20 of those years it had been closed. In 1975, sparks local preservation efforts, and the first historic districts are registered. Kmart comes to town. The golf park gazebo is a bicentennial project in 1976. Parking meters are removed to boost shopping in the declining downtown. The Big Ditch Park is the town's first major citizen-launched initiative. Lobbying for paving and sewer service on Chihuahua and Brewer Hills grows increasingly vehement and finally succeeds. I've identified 1981 as the end of the post-war era in Silver City because a significant change of course begins the following year. Much has happened in the ensuing 40 years, but in this last portion of my presentation, I will focus on local economic trends. Massive layoffs at area mines in 1982 send county unemployment to 40%. It is a major wake-up call. Local leaders realize it is essential to diversify the economic base. Many possibilities, including a racetrack, are discussed, and much energy goes toward attracting a manufacturer or other large employer to the area. Some more modest initiatives prove effective in the long run. One effort focuses on attracting residents whose income does not depend on local jobs, retirees, part-time residents, and people able to work from anywhere, a category that greatly expands with the rise of the internet. Newcomers in this cohort, like the health seekers of old, bring a wide range of knowledge and life experience to their new hometown. Very active as volunteers, their added energy helps Silver City achieve some of its potential in the coming years. Silver City is named one of New Mexico's first Main Street communities in 1985, a time when few people consider our downtown to be an asset. Over the next 36 years, Silver City Main Street will leverage $6.4 million in improvements, including new sidewalks, street lights, street trees, Big Ditch Park expansion, construction of the visitor center and downtown gateway arch, restoration of the Gila Theater, and the new Main Street Plaza. An energized downtown area draws a new generation of shops, restaurants, and galleries. The long vacant Murray Hotel again welcomes guests after extensive rehabilitation. Tourism is emphasized. Historic district walking tour guides and area driving tours highlight cultural heritage. The tour of the Gila bike race draws visitors in unprecedented number. Arts and culture, always part of Silver City life, grows as an economic asset. A homegrown community of artists expands organically. The Members Region Arts Council launches the Blues Festival to wide acclaim. Local initiatives bring about the reconstruction of La Capilla and the creation of Penny Park. The Silver City Museum attains national accreditation. Theater groups and a women's fiber arts collective are formed, and galleries proliferate. Local restaurants gain recognition. The youth mural program unleashes creative energy throughout the region, while WIL promotes lifelong learning. Festivals take place throughout the year. Gila Members Community Radio goes on air. WNMU opens an Office of Cultural Affairs, and its museum completes a major transformation. Syzygy Tile Works, founded in 1993, employs 20 artisans to create custom art tile. There have now been 8 area recipients of the Governor's Award for Excellence in the Arts. Other efforts center on the surrounding natural environment. Boston Hill becomes the town's first open space, tied into a growing local trail system that will connect local parks and other amenities. Much trail work is done by youth conservation corps crews and local volunteers. In 2014, Silver City is named a gateway community for the Continental Divide Trail, and newly granted funding will allow the historic Silver City Waterworks property to become gateway headquarters. We have come full circle. And that's the end of this and the beginning of discussion.
All right, thanks. Hold on 1 second. Hopefully, all right, we're having a little technical difficulty over there. Sorry about that. I just want to thank everybody. Wasn't that a great presentation? So we are going to go ahead and take some questions for Susan. So if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make, go ahead and type them in the chat box, in the QA box. If you want, let Alan know and we will bring you on air and you can talk to her directly. And also on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, go ahead and put your comments in the thread or your questions. They'll be relayed to me and I will ask them to Susan. If you're in the front here at the museum, please send someone back and I will ask the questions for you. If you'd like to come on air, let me know. Alan will be asking. And all right, let's see. Who do we have? Susan, are you still there?
Still there, yes.
Okay. Let's see, we have a question from Georgiana who wants to know, is there documentation of female entrepreneurs or company ownership of women? For example, the Sidewalk Initiative was led by women. That's by Georgiana.
We've gone so deeply into that sidebar, as well as just about every single thing in this presentation, which could be its own presentation. Well, as far as documentation, I'm not exactly sure if there's a list per se, but certainly Elizabeth Warren and Matilda Kaler did remarkable work. I mean, even if they were doing the same work today, it would be remarkable. Because the sidewalk initiative started because Elizabeth Warren, who had been an insurance agent, she was widowed and took over her husband's business, acquired a lot of property. She seemed to have derived a lot of her income from rentals. And she just picked up properties all over the place. And when an ordinance was passed in 1907, this is all part of sprucing up for the health seekers, the requirement was to put in cement sidewalks. Now they called them cement. Cement is just an ingredient of concrete, but I'm going to use their word, on certain areas in town, many of which she happened to own, and it was to be done at her own expense. Matilda Kaler had become a boarder in the Warren home. She had been the principal of the local grade school and had a brother who knew a thing or two about cement. And so they pooled their efforts and built their own cement sidewalks. Later on, other customers wanted them. So it became a very prosperous business. Later on, their work expanded to stabilizing the big ditch and then constructing and remodeling buildings. So that was one aspect. But there were many women who worked in various fields. A lot of women ran local hotels. There were restaurants, enchilada parlors, many of these run by women. So I hope that may help answer the questions.
And the Women's Club movement.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Yeah, the Women's Club in Silver City was organized 1910-ish, actually by the wife and mother of health seekers. And it was something called the Mothers Club. I don't know if it was part of like a nationwide thing, but soon enough it became the Silver City Women's Club, singular, woman. And they went on to tackle all sorts of needed things around town. They did a lot of things to encourage better sanitation and killing flies. And they actually hired a man, or had the town hire him, who had just come from the Panama Canal Zone. And he did an assessment of local needs. So that club, which still exists, has done a variety of sort of charitable and civic things over the years. I know one thing they do is package donated school supplies for area children. And that's certainly a big need in this community.
Okay, thank you, Susan. I'm gonna ask some more. I want to remind everybody to please, if you want to come on air, let me or Alan know and we'll bring you on air. Keep your questions as quick as possible and we'll get through this, and don't go away. We have plenty of great questions. Then we're going to have a break and we're going to have 3 more panelists come up. Nancy Cliff, Council of Governments, Priscilla Lucero, and Main Street Charmaine Wade will talk about some modern day issues. So let's keep going with those questions. And I also want to let people know we have some other scholars in the audience that'll be popping in if you want later. Those of you that can see Alan Reagan's on the top there, he is our representative from Will. He'll let you know a little bit of information about that shortly. And let's see, do we have anyone that wants to come and speak out loud? Okay, we have Priscilla's great presentation. Phil Robertson would like to know if you have a historical timeline for the water supplies for Silver City.
Actually, in the interest of cutting this down to a manageable size, I took out the part about the Allen Springs well in the 1930s. I'll start with the Waterworks itself. It had a deep well behind the building, but it also had an underground collection gallery. It was really a pretty high-tech arrangement for 1887. And it had the capacity of capturing, siphoning stormwater in addition to the water that was pumped out of the well itself. So that wood-fired boiler plant then would pump water across the road, what's now Little Walnut Road, back then it was Waterworks Road, and filled a reservoir on the top of the opposite hill, and then it gravity fed into town. And there were issues. I mean, every modern newfangled thing we ever got in Silver City had issues, but eventually it was realized that a new source of water was going to be important. And Allen Springs is about 10 miles above town. And I believe, I was going to fact check it and I may be wrong, that it had to cross the Continental Divide. If not, it had a 10-mile trip at the very least. And that was a really big thing in Silver City. During the Depression, there was a lot of concern about people's water being cut off. And I think they took some charitable measures during that time. In the, I'm not sure what, 50s, I think the Franks wells outside of town were located, and this is more toward like on the Cliff Highway, I guess it would be west of town. And I'm sure there are more, and if any of you scholars happen to have an answer, please chime in.
I mean, I've been doing some research on and found some information. Over towards the Nimbus Valley, there were some additional wells that were built in the 50s. I'm looking for the name of it in my notes here. I'd have to spend time. Yeah, there was a couple of well fields that were also added in the period after World War II.
And I'm sure there are many more now. Also, the various sewage treatment plants were built and replaced. The wastewater treatment plant below town that we have near Silver Acres went in I think 75. Yeah, there's just so many little facts that I had to not include or take out. Every one of us has commented to each other that the hardest part is cutting what we want to say.
So Susan, this is Alan. I got one tack onto that. Before the Waterworks, what did people do for water and sewer?
Well, some people, a few people had their own wells. Spring Street actually did have a spring, and that may have been one of the sources. I know that there were water trucks, or not trucks, carts that deliveries were made from. And we had an ice plant created in, I think, early 1880s. Robert Black, who was the builder who constructed all those monumental buildings that you saw, he had a planing mill that did a lot of the fancy architectural work, but he also had, for a time, an ice plant so people could get ice from an ice wagon. But I honestly don't know the answer. There are some things that are so just everyday that no one thought it was anything special. You know, they didn't think to write it down or comment unless maybe great progress had been made and they wanted to note how far we had come. Steve.
When did Chihuahua Hill get paved roads and indoor plumbing? The 50s, was it?
As for paved roads, 1981, I believe, is when it finally happened.
Wow.
1981. Some portions, I think, of Brewer Hill were paved before that because it was less challenging technically, but it really was an issue. I mean, the hill was solid rock, and I think that people just, you know, there may have been more things at play than just it's hard to do, but it was hard to do.
Yeah, I was reading Aylman's autobiography, Pioneering in Territorial Silver City. He talked about building his own personal well for this house.
Right, right.
And I can't remember how deep he said he had to go. It didn't seem it was that deep, but he was always concerned about things falling into the well. and so, yeah, so it sounds like
children.
So it sounds like he had his own personal well.
Yes, yes. In fact, Aylman and his partner, his mining partner, Meredith, they own this entire block, and they put the well on the boundary line between the two houses. And he talked about the doctors.
All right, you want to go on air? I'm sorry, Susan. I got too many.
Hi. Okay. Let's see, Susan. We have another question from Mary, who's wondering about some of the buildings that showed the Santa Fe style characteristics. Were they architect designed?
Now I'm sort of grasping around because I'm not exactly sure what building she's thinking of. Now, the railroad station was designed by a man usually described as, I think, like a civil engineer, John A. Harlan. And he built a lot of stations on the railroad system. It was the Santa Fe Railroad. And that was certainly popular. That style was certainly popular in 1915. The building, the biggest one I can think of is the El Sol Theater on Bullard Street. And I think that it was just designed by the local builder who constructed it.
Yeah, she's talking about, she mentions the post office and the women's club.
Oh, okay. The post office, the name of the designer will be on the plaque that I think is still on the front, and the name escapes me right now. The women's club was the work of, I believe it was both Tatch brothers, Frank and Dick, who individually and together did a huge, huge amount of building. Frank Tatch was sort of the Robert Black of the 1960s and 70s. But yeah, it was just in a day when someone with just a good basic knowledge of building could design one, and it would turn out pretty well.
All right. We have just a few more minutes. If you want to come on air and ask any questions for Susan, let us know. Let's see, did we miss anyone? Okay, let me see. We have a question from Joyce. Let me find you. And sorry about this. Okay. Oh, that does help. Oh, okay. Let's see, a timeline. Hydrology, water. Priscilla says that when the grant program, community development block grant program started to apply for more monies for water, sewer, and roads. The paving in Burr Hill was a paving assessment before grant programs were available. That's very interesting. Blake Farley would like to know if you could speak just for a couple minutes about some of the old Adobe buildings you see using local methods, but designed in a Victorian architectural style.
Well, this is where I think I would need, some reference material in front of me. Well, one of them that comes to mind is, it's on the corner of Yankee Street and Arizona, the southeast corner. That's a house that was built in, I think, the early 1890s, but it has a lot of the Victorian trim work. Just a gee whiz fact I'll throw in there. In front of that particular building is a stone wall, and a workman was actually building that wall when one of our floods struck. We had the Pinos Altos floods that came from the north and Bear Mountain, but then on the west we would get the chloride floods from Chloride Flat. And this was a situation where they arrived at separate times. The guy is desperately trying to finish his work on the wall and has to grab his tools and run to high ground because that's how fast the flood came down Yankee Street.
All right, thank you. I hope that answers your question, Blake. And Joyce Newman wants to know, what was the presence and contribution of the Chinese community?
We had Chinese residents as early as 1873. It was a largely male population. And in that time frame, most of their work involved laundries, restaurants, and at a certain point in time, gardening. I'm not exactly sure. Do any of you know a date for when the Chinese garden was started?
Really, from the very beginning, there were Chinese farmers out in the Membris and other places that provided truck farming. So it was very early on that the Chinese residents began to provide vegetables.
Yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a moment. By the early 1900s, that little Chinatown that we had is very kind of informal near the corner of Texas and Yankee Streets. We started to see these little stores, which I perceive to be a little, better economics being in play than, say, the early laundries, which must have been a huge, huge amount of work. I do know that in, I think, 1886, there was this campaign from some locals who wanted to run the Chinese laborers out of the area. And another group formed to support the Chinese. And whether this is the same thing or a different incident, I again would have to check. But the ladies of the Methodist Church took on as a project teaching English to the Chinese. I believe in the hallway of the Methodist Church, even now, there are photographs that show these groups, very interesting mixed groups with a number of Chinese people in the photograph. So I do know the Chinese gardens continued well into the 20th century. I don't know if it's late as the 50s, but
I found evidence that the wife of Martin Bremen lived off the rents of the Chinese garden.
Oh my gosh.
At the beginning of the 20th century.
Wow.
I can't remember when she died, but that made me think a little bit about were they renting that land or not?
Yeah.
That's what I want to research more about.
Now, farther up Texas Street. There was a large house that doesn't stand anymore. I think it was maybe still standing in the 40s, but it was called the Texas House. And it was sort of a, I don't know, boarding house or shared residence of a number of Chinese people in town. So yeah, it's an interesting part of the history.
Yeah, we
There's
have a
just-
few more.
There's so many parts that could use more research.
Susan, we have a few more questions, and I want to get to them as quickly as possible so that we can get our break in and bring everyone else on. So we have two questions. One is from Blake Farley that wants to know about the tunnels under downtown. And then there's another from Laurie Runnels, who is connected and wants to know that that she heard a rumor that the tunnels were from Chinese businesses, but neither could confirm. So I thought we could
Wow.
two birds and one answer that.
Well, I don't know if the Chinese tunnels are an urban legend or not. I mean, people from generations have been talking about them as if they are a real thing. And back when History Detectives was still on PBS, I thought we should get them here to find out once and for all. There were certainly interconnected basements, some of which might have been tunnel-like downtown. There's tunnels underneath the streets that were put in for utilities. And for instance, between Broadway and Bullard, I guess there's an underground tunnel. And in fact, there was supposed to be, and I believe it, a connection between the basement of what is now City Hall, used to be the American National Bank, and Howell Drug, and how Bobby Jackson, the pharmacist, used to carry his deposits through the tunnel to the bank. But short answer is, I don't know. And other people have said, oh yeah, I've been in them. So further investigation is needed.
Okay, thank you. There was a question from Annabelle Britton about knowing more about the history of Adobe buildings on Chihuahua Hill. She says she has a historical house trying to preserve the visibility of bricks on the interior, and Charmaine gave a great response to that there is a property owner's toolkit on the Main Street project. It looks like we are mostly covering these questions. I want to remind everybody to please stick around after the break, where we will bring on Charmaine and Priscilla and Nancy, and they will talk about these issues that are more related to our the modern day relevance, and talks about the community. For right now, I only want questions about the history for Susan, and then we will bring on the others. I want to give a shout out to our scholars that are there in the audience. Our live studio audience. They are here to chime in with some of their expertise. They'll be back as well. And you had heard a little bit from Scott Fritz. He is our expert on the economy, and he will be speaking in a few more weeks. I have one more question for Susan from Blake, and he wants to know if any of the Chinese work with the railroad at the downtown station.
Not to my knowledge, but it's possible. As far as I know, that the Chinese here they didn't come with the railroad, as the saying goes. I do know that in, I think it's 1875 or so, Henry Lisinski, who was a businessman in the Southwest, went over to Clifton and trying to recruit a bunch of Chinese workers who may have come from worked with the railroad. And there was some little uproar that happened, but I think he did bring more with him. For the most part, the Chinese were all men. There was at least one Chinese woman in the early days that was mentioned. Charlie's son, the famous one whose laundry was robbed by Billy the Kid, was married to a Hispanic woman. I'm just grabbing every little stray fact I can come up with. Do you know anything more?
Well, I came across some information that when the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was signed into law, the Chinese came across the US-Mexican border into the United States. And before Deming, and then I found out information that this was where Mexican merchants passed customs here in Silver City for a period of time, before the custom house in Deming was established. So did they come to Silver City via Mexico is a question I am asking rhetorically.
It's a good question. I know there were a lot of Chinese in Mexico.
Yeah, right.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Susan. Everyone give Susan a brief, not a brief, I am so sorry. Give her a great big round of applause. She did a fantastic job, and thank you so much. I'm going to turn away to Alan Reagan from WIL, the Western Institute for Lifelong Learning, and he's going to let us know a little bit about that. Susan, as well as the other scholars and our guest commentators, will be back after the break, but right now we will hear from Alan and then a little bit from Melody, who runs our new and improved gift shop, and she'll let you know some of the things that we have on sale today, including, but not limited to, Built to Last, Susan Berry's wonderful book on the architecture and construction around this town. It's a great read, and so much more information than she could possibly fit into this half hour, even though she has so much more to go. So here is Alan Reagan from Western Institute for Lifelong Learning.
Thanks, Erin. Just a real quick plug for most of you are probably familiar with the Western Institute for Lifelong Learning. We're all about learning in community here in Silver City and in Grant County. And we're partnering with, supporting these programs with the Silver City Museum, which we've been doing for a while now and hope to continue doing long into the future. When you think about it, the museum, in addition to sort of preserving and documenting our heritage, they're all about learning in community too. So it's kind of a natural tie together that we both are interested in supporting, both hearing from these experts within our community and beyond, and then facilitating what will be coming up after the break, some community dialogue and discussion about what we all know or don't know about the community and what we think are the issues and opportunities we should be paying attention to. If you're not familiar with WIL, or even if you are, go to our website. It's will.community. I think that's right. I'll put it in the chat as well as a live link. But it has information on the courses that we offer to our members, public programs, how to become a member, and other ways to get involved. It is, like many things here in Silver City, basically a volunteer supported organization. So we encourage people to get involved with both the museum and WIL in the future. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you everybody for sticking around. We have some great guests coming up. I want to bring on here in a second. We will have Priscilla Lucero, Nancy Cliff, and Charmaine Waite. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you real quick. Here is Charmaine Waite from Main Street, and she will be joining us here in just a moment. And Nancy Cliff, historian and activist. Priscilla Lucero from Council of Governments. We are so happy to have you all with us here today. And here in the upper right-hand corner, you see our scholars. They are some of the others that are joining Susan here. But I would like to keep our conversations to a little bit about the future and the present day, and let's see what you guys have to say. So let us know. And if Alan reaches out to you to come on air, please do it. We want to get as many voices as possible. All right, so hi, sure. Who wants to start?
I'd like to start.
All right.
So it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to speak a little bit about not the past, but also the future. And so I was born and raised here in Silver City, and of course I grew up in the Brewer Hill area. So there's so many things that I've really enjoyed from Susan's presentation to kind of know some of that history when I was a little girl, but also many things that kind of still stick with me, and why I am so passionate about moving this community forward because of my history within this community. So I'll start out with a couple of things that is happening economically and how we're going to diversify the economy for Silver City, Grant County. And so I think there was a question earlier in the chat with reference to the 5 Points Initiative. And so there's a whole collaborative at this point trying to really expand our opportunities around outdoor recreation. So part of that includes how do we manage to be inclusive and validate all of the local governments within this county, so that you can actually then begin to look at how do we become united as a county and municipality as a whole, and all the unincorporated areas. So that's an initiative that was started by Lee Gruber, who really just started to look at how do we connect the dots, because if you go back to some of the history, the mining district sometimes felt excluded because they felt Silver City was getting everything. And so we have to kind of figure out how we bring that unity. In all reality, I think there are many opportunities, but it's also, we also have to be realistic that part of the challenges in the mining district are really that they're landlocked. So if we can take existing buildings within these local governments and connect them back into Silver City and vice versa, then everybody benefits, right? And so we're going to start with the number one phase of that is really the Silver City Waterworks building. So the Silver City Waterworks building is really the very first building that has, as we know, that was constructed in 1887, is really one of those buildings that has been remediated, utilizing EPA dollars to, number one, do an environmental assessment, but also to be able to remediate those environmental concerns, which in this particular case was primarily bat guano. So in the last couple of months, we've had the congressional leaders here looking at how this is spurring outdoor economy, being the trailhead for the Continental Divide Trail, and how that's all being connected from, you know, part of it is really that safety corridor that we see between the village of Santa Clara and the city of Bayard. And how do we expand that corridor study and bringing it back into Silver City and connecting those 5 points? So we have one point is over in the Arenas Valley, which is, I think was an old school. And then I think we have a hotel in Santa Clara, and then also looking at the Union Hall in Bayard. And then in Hurley would be the actual railroad depot. So we've seen a number of things in various communities and what they've done with railroad depots to be able to preserve that historical piece. But I think most importantly, one of the benefits we see from diversifying the economy is that we have the very first wilderness, which is a nationally very first wilderness. And I think we've never really done a good job of highlighting our assets. And so now, as we evolve, we need to really diversify that economy. So that's one of the issues that we're addressing, and there's more to come. So part of that is also how do we connect all of these trail systems? And we saw this during COVID, right? I think people were flocking here from all parts of the United States because that was the one thing they could do, is be outdoors and enjoy outdoors. And we all really know what it was like to be on Zoom calls 8 hours a day, at least some of us. And so it was very challenging in that regard. So we strive to continue to improve our infrastructure so that we have the amenities. And I think there was a question about water. And so a lot of my work has really been around water. And the reason for that is because that is the basic need, and no matter what we do, right? Basic needs. If we don't have a reliable water source, we can't grow our economy. We can't take care of ourselves. And so I often do presentations about what would life be if you would imagine your life without water, right? So we wouldn't exist. But even if you were without water for a couple of hours or days, what would that look like? So I'm a real advocate for making sure that we have adequate infrastructure to provide our basic needs that can then lead to ensuring other economic opportunities to flourish. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. So I'd be happy to answer future questions so that there's plenty of time for others to speak about what they're working on.
Right, thanks. Does anyone else want to chime in? Now, remember, this is a conversation, so Just let it happen. Charmaine, what's Main Street up to these days?
Well, I want to thank Susan for a great presentation and Priscilla for doing so much work. I don't know if people realize that she does work not just for Grant County, but the whole four county area. So it's a big deal. And so it's wonderful to have so many dedicated people working for our future. What was great about the presentation is that it tied exactly to what Main Street does. Main Street was founded in the early 80s, a national Main Street program, because malls started. And so historic downtowns were decimated. All the businesses moved into the malls and left these empty downtowns. So Main Streets were started as a way to revitalize and get the economies back in our historic downtowns. And this talk, it demonstrates the importance of historic preservation, of preserving your buildings, because it's not just about the buildings, it's about the culture, it's about your history. So when you preserve a building, you're preserving your history, you're preserving your culture that you have, and you can move that forward. And what we are shown nationally in study after study is that people love historic downtowns. We have somebody who said they really like walking around downtown, might move here. People look and want to move here because we have a super walkable downtown. And we have a super walkable downtown because we preserve so much of these historic buildings. And so that's really key. And the downtown people may not realize is we do a visit downtown Silver City guide, and we just updated it now that we're out of COVID, or out of the shutdowns at least. And we have 132 businesses downtown, plus 4 houses of worship. And people don't realize that we have that many businesses downtown. So together, that's a huge gross receipts tax block. So it's important to shop local. And also we know, and Priscilla can show that too, is that there's not like a big business that's going to save us. We know because the mines fund the community development fund to diversify our economy, and the outdoors is a brilliant way of doing that with the Continental Divide Trail. But what was shown in study after study is it's the small businesses that keep community sustainable. They're the people who live here. That money stays in our economy 4 times. So when somebody stays in our community and shops locally, those dollars turn over 4 times, as opposed to just going out to a headquarters somewhere else. So it's really important to shop locally. And we have this great downtown because of this historic preservation. And we have the Big Ditch Park, which was our Main Street. And it's a great little park. We see tourists there. And so I encourage people who haven't been down there, who are residents, to bring a sack lunch or go out and get some takeout and go sit down there. I think you'll be surprised how pleasant it is. It's just a block off of Main Street or Bullard Street now, and it's usually about 10 degrees cooler. So it's a nice place to have an activity or an event. So I encourage that, and just shop locally for sustainability. It's our small business owners and our neat downtown that makes people want to be here. Downtowns are often looked at as the living rooms of any community. And I could go on and on, so I will stop talking if you have some questions.
While you're talking, Joyce Newman wanted everyone to know, she just wanted to comment on the importance of maintaining authenticity while promoting tourism, and that's a big one. And that's also one of the things that we're hoping to do here. Nancy, did you have anything that you wanted to say? I saw that you had a question earlier.
I have a historical question for Susan, and that is the difference, if she could speak to the difference between the town charter and the territorial charter.
Yes, they're actually one and the same. Up until recently, it just was the town charter. The reason the territorial comes up in conversation, which has caused some people to think that there's 2 different charters, it was issued by the territorial government. And why that's important now is that we have the only active territorial charter in New Mexico. Unlike all the other towns, we have our own ability to decide things that might otherwise be decided for us. And that's really a significant thing. Thank you.
All right. And I have a question from Marilyn Alcorn, who wants to know I think this is largely for Priscilla. Is there the retirement senior population getting any serious consideration as a way to build economic development around that population?
I believe that we need to do a better job with that, right? So, I mean, when we look at our vulnerable populations, which are really children and the elderly. I think there needs to be more work around that. I think we're starting really to try to make sure that if anything, that we're providing more housing opportunities, which you've seen the development of a new senior housing complex, and say, I think we've done a great job of providing housing opportunities for seniors. Is that enough? Probably not, because as we know, as the population increases, there's going to be more and more people needing those types of housing opportunities. But from a health perspective, I think that we're doing better, right? And we're blessed as far as having a local hospital. But when I think about other things about how we're addressing that, I don't think we're doing as great a job as I think we would like. And maybe that comes from my own background, because I'm caring for elderly parents at this point, and I look for the services to provide them, or even to be able to provide me the resources or the education that I need to care for them. And that has been a difficult piece for me. I've worked, I'm a pretty resourceful person, a mom with dementia, and the resources are not here. But it's not uncommon, as you all know, in living in a rural area, for us not to have those resources at our fingertips. And that's where my advocacy comes. And everything that I've dealt with, from water to housing to transportation to caring for elderly and children, there's a big gap in knowing the difference about what we're dealing with in a rural area versus what we're dealing with in a metropolitan area. And in my career, what I've seen is that those programs that are really intended to benefit the program have moved out of benefit rural areas, have moved out of the rural areas into the metropolitan areas, which does not help our local people. And I'm adamant, and that's one of the reasons why in the legislature this year we have a new initiative under Senate Bill 183 is to have a rural ombudsman, because those are the challenges. We face them in funding, we face them in healthcare, we face them, we face them in just about every aspect. And I think that there needs to be more of that to be able to move this community forward, because nonetheless, that is going to be a need. So I think that people don't really know, that it's not till you're at that point in your life about the needs. And so somehow we need to figure out how we can do that as a community and really bring that forward. And I think that's quite a challenge, because the resources and how you do that is not a simple one. But nonetheless, nothing is simple, right? As Susan mentioned earlier, there's always been a challenge. I think this project's going to go smoothly. It never goes smoothly. But yeah, one thing I can say about our community is that we're determined and we're resilient. And that's what rural areas are. During COVID, I think we probably dealt better with COVID than any other community as a result of having to be resourceful and resilient. And so it's not easy on any of us, but nonetheless, I think we were able to survive that a little easier than others. So I think, Marilyn, we need to continue our efforts in that. And I think it should be something that should not be forgotten.
So I have a question. Since I've been here a little over 20 years, and the population has been remarkably consistent over those years. It's always somewhere around 10,000. You have any comments about that?
So I think part of it is with regards to the fluctuations in employment right through the copper mining company. But what I also know is that Silver City is the hub for the 4-county region. I think I kind of have some background in some potential opportunities coming to the Southwest region that many of you probably wouldn't know about and that are confidential at this point. But I think that we have not been able to move past that because of these fluctuations in employment. And how do we make people, or how do we see people, how do we get people to see what our amenities are? And I think that's changing. I think it's changing with people flocking here as a result of COVID, the outdoor rec. If you're at the state level in the discussions, I think you're gonna find that maybe the population within the local government hasn't increased, but if you look at the connections and water associations outside of the city limits, you're going to see that there's been an increase, right? And so I see that from all of the work that I do with some of these unincorporated areas. And the reality is that people want space. Many of them don't want to live within the city limits. And so, I mean, I think, and then you see the younger population say, no, I want to live in town, downtown, which is very different from what we're accustomed to. I think it's just one of those things of preference, but from a county standpoint, I'll be curious to see what the numbers are for the census, but I would imagine as a county that the numbers have increased and our city population might be decreasing. But nonetheless, I think that's why it's just kind of stabilized at that amount, at that population.
Nancy, just from a Main Street perspective, we see that people sometimes come here with the idea that they want a small town, and they've come from maybe a place where maybe they're only 20 minutes from a large population. And I do see this, and they stay here for a couple of years and then they move back because they don't want to be, several hours from an airport, a large airport, or they're not used to having all the amenities that they're used to. So I think what's going to happen as a community and a county develop the outdoor recreation, I think it's going to attract a different people who are going to come here knowing what they want, which is the outdoors. If you're coming here thinking, oh, I live in a small town, and you've never lived in a small town, oftentimes that doesn't work out. And I see that turnover with the real estate and stuff, with people coming here and not realizing what they're moving into.
Related issue is the fact that I think young people who've grown up here tend to leave for better opportunities. And Priscilla, you're suggesting that might be different in the future?
I do. And I think, and this is just my observation from growing up in the Brewer Hill in a low income neighborhood. If you look at me as an example, I use myself as an example in discussions all the time. I think there are culturally, what was presented in front of us is really not knowing what our opportunities were. And our kids don't really know what's beyond them, right? Or what they see and what they see their parents doing. I'm one of those individuals. I would not be here today if it wasn't for people in this community who mentored me, who taught me to believe that I could be more than what I saw in front of me. And I think I've achieved that over 34 years now in this career. So for me to be where I am at a place today is really heartfelt, because nobody would ever think that I'd be where I'm today. Not even my own people, or not even my own neighbors. But that has really evolved because I had to prove myself, right? And number one, I was a Hispanic female coming from a low income neighborhood, and those were challenges, right? But not challenges that we couldn't overcome. So as a person who has a son who's returned back to this locality, is that people really want to come back to this lifestyle. It's just a matter of really, I think, a preference of what they want to see for themselves. But I also think that it's really our responsibility to really showcase what opportunities they do have, because I don't think we do a good job of that. And so there are several of his friends have come back. They're now the ones that are working in the schools, working at banks, and coming back to this community because this is the community they love and they were raised in and want to come back. And I think you just have the differences of individuals and what their preferences are. But I couldn't be more grateful as a person who was raised here, educated here, and committed my career to this community in this region. I feel fulfilled, and I feel like I will continue to give to this community. The money isn't everything. It's about making sure that we've made the best decision to enhance this community for the long term. And I feel very strong about that more and more people are coming back.
I can speak to that too, Priscilla and Nancy. We're having more of the businesses that are opening up, the new businesses in downtown, being opened and run by people who were born and raised here. And I love seeing that. It's people putting down the roots. That's how you make a sustainable community. It's people who have roots here, who have investment in their families and in this community. And it's thrilling to see.
I also want to add to that, Nancy. See, if you go back to the early years when we had the strikes and the changes in the mining and people left the community, right? But if you go back now and look at how many people have come back, they might have done they might have left and pursued a career in other states. But if you see a lot of those individuals, they've come back home. And we're actually doing what we call a co-starters program with the community to spur small businesses to open their own business and try to meet whatever need there is in the community. And when you talk to those individuals that have already fulfilled their career somewhere else and want to just start a new business. And then we have youth that are from the local areas say, like, this is my opportunity to be able to create a new business because I want to stay here. And I think that goes back to my comment about how do we show them that there are opportunities? How do we bring these opportunities to them so they can stay here?
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Nancy. Great question.
I want to remind everyone out there in the audience, we have some great questions coming in here in chat, and I will relay them to you in just a moment. But please, if you are on Zoom and you would like to come on air, we want to hear your voice. Let me know, and I will allow you to talk, and we will unmute you, and you'll be able to speak to these lovely people all on your own. So let me know. We want to get that out there. How are our scholars doing? You guys doing okay over there?
It's fine, yeah.
They're
Y'all
all
are
still
making me
up,
think.
right?
You're making-
Do you have anything that
Not
you
yet
want to
commented.
add so far? No, we're good. Okay. So I have a question from Gail Simmons, who wants to know, as a former employer and self-employed person, I see a real need for a well-educated, well-paid, and well-insured workforce to work for the local small businesses. Where should we turn for that? And I'd like to invite Scott or some of our other scholars who will be working. Scott specifically is going to be talking about small businesses here in a few weeks in the economy. So I would like to invite him to chime in on that if he's interested.
Well, of course, Western New Mexico University, it's been here since 1893, originally as a teacher's college. We have an educational facility here that I think is unique relative to other rural communities in the American West. I mean, having a college here is not only going to serve our students and a future workforce, but it's also a draw.
Yeah.
I mean, I know of several retirees who have moved here to Silver City because you have a rural community that has higher education. And I would also like to give kudos to Magdaleno Manzanares. Magdaleno Manzanares is the Vice President of External Affairs, and he oversees our vocational education programs. And so we have welding. There's some other initiatives that they're doing over there. I think they have something akin to teaching certification in tourism. They're moving in that direction. I think they're moving towards environmental technology certification. So yeah, I think Western New Mexico University is a gem for our community, and it has a great history as well.
All right, thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I like to. So one thing I do want to mention on that, if you aren't all aware, is that Grant County was a recent recipient of an economic development award through the federal government to actually begin to work on workforce and economic development. So what you were talking about right aligns with what we're doing through the Grant County Workforce Program, and that is working with the university, trying to meet the needs of the small businesses and the school districts, and developing new career pathways to meet the needs of our businesses. And so that's in process. So there are new career pathways that are forthcoming. And I agree that there needs to be a different way of looking in education and certificate programs or other certifications that can help people move faster and getting involved in their in their career is a great way. And I think that what we used to consider a traditional student may no longer be that same traditional student, but I think it allows them opportunities. And I also believe that everybody learns differently. In addition to that, something we have really made a great gain on is really receiving funds from the workforce development program out of Elephant Butte. We had not done a good job of receiving funds to be able to train individuals in certain career pathways. And this is the first in moving in that direction. So it comes back to collaboration among all of the partners to make some of these opportunities become a reality.
May I say, this is Steve Fox. Susan early on raised the question of why Silver City survived and prospered, where so many other mining towns in the late 1800s did not. So what made the difference here? It's a very hard question. I don't know whether you have an answer for it, Susan, but whatever that was, we should bottle it and use it now, bring it to the fore now, be aware of it now. So you have any guesses about this, Susan?
Well, one thing that comes to my mind, and especially this is looking at the changes over the last 40 years and the reference to authenticity. This was not some outside, thing that was imposed on the community. Everything that has led to the results of today, and which will be the cornerstone for the future, all just kind of evolved naturally. And a huge amount of it, and this alludes to what Priscilla was saying, the resilience, the ingenuity, the fact that people here, it's just a little bit harder to be here in some ways. Mm-hmm. And there are just many opportunities to be creative. A thing that I would have mentioned if my presentation time, had been bigger, was that the things that have been happening involve so many young people. I think about the youth mural program, and people who were little kids at the beginning are now teaching other younger kids. There's just been so much process that has involved people in a really engaging and fun way. And I think that it really comes down to the people, but also opportunities to look at things creatively and brainstorming and solutions. And again, the people who have come in from somewhere else, who've had all this life experience. And I'm sure, although I haven't actually heard anyone say this, but I'm sure that will is one of the reasons that people move here now. So there's that cross-pollination that makes for a stronger, more interesting community.
I agree with that. I like that information on Will, and we have Alan with us, so maybe he'll want to come back on and talk about that a little bit. There is an anonymous question about what is being done to address the climate emergency with educating and implementing action. I'm going to hold that thought around for a little bit, and Stephen Fox, who you can see leaning forward there, he is going to be one of our speakers in a future presentation about the environment, and I'm thinking that he might be better off to ask that either at the end here, or through email, or through his conversation. So let us know how you would like that addressed. If you want to email me, education@silversteinmuseum.org. And right now I have Marilyn has a question for you guys, and we're going to bring her on right now. Marilyn, are you there?
I am here.
Hi.
So the question I had is around bouncing off what Priscilla said on our economic development is, are we really focusing heavily at all on vocational education programs, starting in our high schools and then moving on into the university level? I mean, if you ever tried to get a plumber, an electrician, or even a small engine repair person, in town, it's extremely difficult, and it seems like the need is there, but the workers are not. And I'm sure we have a lot of young people who are interested in those fields, but I'm not sure we're providing them with the access to those types of training programs.
So I can address that, Marilyn. And so, yes, we are. And I think it's something we're going to have to work on for a while. But a couple of things that happen through this workforce group and some community dialogues is really trying to be able to meet some of the needs of the community. So one of those is really now educating students at the high school level around forest management, so that when they're ready to come out of high school or for summer, for example, then they can go and help and work with the Forest Service, and then potentially leading to them coming back and working as adults with the Forest Service themselves. So that's one. Another one is really around the need, and I think this came about a lot around during COVID, is really enhancing our opportunities for EMTs and healthcare around nurses. So there'll be programs at the high school level there that can help them then move their education forward in that, and then others around very specific around technology. Now, I will say that from a perspective of bringing in and having discussions with workforce with some others around Freeport, McMoran, and other things, there are going to be more things to come in those different types of certificate programs, as you were mentioning, because I think we do have youth here that's just their thing. They want to learn how to do welding, or they want to learn how to be a plumber, and then we need to be able to guide them. But I think it's important that kids are exposed to these different job opportunities as young as they can. And that's why I go back to people here. We did a survey of students in the 8th grade when we were looking at what did they want to be. And if you ask them, all of these students in the 8th grade said they wanted to be a miner, they wanted to be a teacher and a healthcare worker. And what that leads me to believe is that that's what they're exposed to, because maybe that's what their parent is and that's what they do, but they don't really know what other opportunities are out there. So that goes back to me talking about me as a person being so close to family and not really being allowed to do other things because we were economically disadvantaged, really helped didn't really help me to learn about those opportunities, but nonetheless, it taught me how to be determined and resilient, as I mentioned before. And I think we strive for making sure that our community is doing better. So that's the whole initiative around the workforce. And then on top of that, we are bringing in workforce dollars now as we start to determine what those occupations are, so that we can begin to do other programs. So we're only in the beginning stages. We are in the process of hiring a specific individual to do specifically that. So more things to come around that, Marilyn.
That's awesome. And that's very good information.
Thanks,
Does that
Priscilla.
answer your question, Marilyn?
Yes, thanks, Priscilla.
You bet.
All right, thank you so much. And I have a question also regarding education from Sandra Lucas. She wants to say that she thinks that internet education as well as entertainment is here to stay, especially during COVID shutdown. Her question is, what is being done to provide good internet service to every home in Grant County and all rural communities everywhere?
So I can address some of that. I know that I have all the answers, but we are very much involved with some of the new legislation that has been coming about as a result of the need for internet service, right? And so I've dealt in regions where we do have a regional broadband plan, and in some regions there is no internet, there is no access. And so that goes back to knowing about what the challenges are versus rural versus non-rural. And so one of the things is that this American Rescue Plan dollars that are coming down to the local governments, that is, those are dollars that can potentially be used for expanding our internet service to our communities. So that is absolutely something that we're looking towards. There's a whole other initiative at the state level for enhancing broadband through grant funding opportunities. So I think that I think it's just one of those things that everybody knows that there's a need. And again, we need to make sure that those dollars are funneling to our most rural areas to be able to provide access. So great things happening there. And yeah, as you know, in government, things don't move as quickly as we would like them to, but opportunities are coming.
Absolutely. The definition of infrastructure is changing every decade, isn't it?
Yeah, now
Also-
we're trying to convince, you know, federal agencies that economic development also includes childcare. You know, none of us can go to work if we don't have childcare services. So that's an important piece. And so it's taken years to include broadband as part of that economic development piece.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm going to bring on Mary Reagan, who has something she would like to say as well. I can find her or not. Oh, there she is. Hi, Mary, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Some of you know I spent my career working in historic preservation and the importance of promoting, maintaining a sense of place for lots of reasons. Susan and Charmaine, you know that I am huge fans of the work that you have done and are doing, and I really appreciate that. But I want to kind of sort of continue on this conversation that's happening about youth. I'm wondering if there are actual steps in place or ideas that people have to better integrate WNMU students into the community. I rarely see college-age demographic represented in activities around town. COVID aside, obviously, before COVID, is it just me? Are other folks seeing college-age students integrated into the community? Or is it just me that thinks we should be taking steps to better integrate that age group into our community activities towards convincing those college-age students who are looking for careers that this is a place that they can find that career through just getting to know the community better?
All right.
Go ahead, Priscilla. I have some answers. Oh, okay. So just as Main Street, I know, so Main Street also, we work in a district, so we're not broader than our downtown area, but we do have a Western New Mexico student discount program. And we have stickers that we give the businesses that they can put on. And then we have in the racks and in the information bags that they give to the new students, listing of all the businesses downtown that offer students discounts. So we really try to promote that to get students to come downtown. There's also we work with their student outreach person. Abe Villarreal recently moved, but we've already had some of the students come down and help us with our banners, our downtown banners. And 2 years ago, we had an intern from Western, and that intern has decided she wants to do community development work. She's at the University of Oklahoma right now. So we try as best we can, and we do appreciate the partnership with Western when we do have activities. They ask for Main Street to go and give talks to the parent groups when they come in. We just recently put together about 150 packets of information about downtown and the town to the new students and to parents for their orientation tours. So we do that kind of outreach. And again, the big thing we try to do is let those students know that there's discounts downtown for them.
And I could speak to this as well because I teach American history at the university. We do have a service learning requirement. So students have to take a service learning course at least once before they graduate. So that's a way in which students can get inserted into the community, as it were. For example, I've had students volunteer here at the Silver City Museum. I think one of the things about our community is that Western New Mexico University is not right next to downtown. So think if you're at the University of Arizona, you're right in downtown Tucson. So there's that distance that I do know that President Joe Shepard was trying to minimize. I think he had an initiative. He was trying to what's the word? He's going to try to bring more businesses closer to the university in terms of rezoning. I don't know how successful he was at that. It was a couple of years ago. I think that's one of the issues. It's just the campus it takes a little bit of a walk for students. It's, you know, it's not like the University of California at Berkeley, let's say. And I think another issue too is, as our university is offering more online courses, we just do not have students on campus as much. Yes, I think President Shepherd's 4K plan to increase the student population to 4,000 over the next 2 or 3 years, that's his plan. If it's successful, will bring more students onto campus, and that would, of course, mean bringing more. That would mean more students in town. So those are some of the things that came to my mind as we were talking about this.
All right, thank you. We have a comment from Gwendolyn Lacey. I'm going to bring her on here. Gwendolyn, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right.
So thank you. This is great. I'm really excited to hear everything today and all the wonderful work that you've all done. Maybe this is a sensitive subject, but I'm curious. I've also done historic restorations and been involved and lived in historic towns. What is being done to implement the noise ordinance in downtown Silver City? And I will take that answer off. And I'm not talking about during the day when people, there's just, you know, Susan's a neighbor and shaking her head. So I'd love to hear. Thanks.
For downtown, there is the beginnings of conversations. Main Street recently did a community survey for a project plan updating and adding new plans to the downtown action plan, which is how Main Street works. We take our projects from the downtown action plan and work hand in hand with the town of Silver City to implement plans. And in that survey, we definitely got feedback that the noise issue is an issue downtown. And if we want to encourage more live work, or if we want to encourage more of our businesses or old buildings to be renovated into apartments, it needs to be addressed. So that is something I cannot speak for the town for, but as Main Street, we are interested in resolving it as a way that is a win-win, that businesses like bars that want to have music, that there's a time that it's cut off, and how to enforce it, and how do we make it so it's something that makes our community vibrant and isn't a distraction, and it kind of balances things. So that conversation has been started, and hopefully that will be a broader conversation. But again, I can't speak for the town, but as Main Street, we are trying to begin that conversation and begin those solutions.
Okay, thank you very much. Looks like we have another question from Gail Simmons that goes back to education a little. She wants to know, once the young people are trained, small employers need to step up to the task of providing a livable wage and insurance coverage. There is need to train small business owners. Can WNMU, who is not actually present, and county of governments address that?
So I can address that a little bit. So during COVID, the Council of Governments received an award specifically for economic recovery, right? And one of the things that we're looking at, and this is also inclusive of the award that was made to Grant County, is how do we develop a business retention and expansion program? And I remember that doing that early in my career and how beneficial that was. But along with that means, and I see this a lot in communities, is how we begin to build capacity. And I think for me, we have to go back to the basics, right? And basics to me means, how do we build that work ethic in individuals so that we can ensure that they're providing the best customer service? From a state level, we're continuing to see the increases in the hourly wage, and before not too long, it will be at $15 an hour. And so again, I think you have to address all pieces of that to be able to ensure that we're all doing everything we can to have adequate workers. And it's a two-way street, right? So So there has to be that. So we are continuing to plan on how do we provide trainings, number one. Number two, we're losing out on opportunities as communities if we don't know how to respond to federal government opportunities. So if businesses could understand how they can actually do business with government, that would be a way to enhance their revenues going into a small business and help them become more sustainable. And I think that conversation continues. I mean, I think we're open to ideas. How do we get messaging out? How do we do all these things? So I have a dedicated person specifically working on those things so that we can, number one, start up new business. Number two, help rebuild business because we have a rebuild business program. And then we're also working with youth to be able to generate how these youth can become business owners if they want to become their own entrepreneur. We have lots of youth that just want to do that. That's their thing. And so I think we're trying everything possible to be able to assist in that way.
And I wanted to add, Erin, that Main Street during this whole COVID thing, there was a lot of opportunities, and Main Street was able to offer to our downtown businesses classes on social marketing, social media marketing, online classes. We did several classes that were open not just to the Main Street district, to everybody on how to sell online, because with the shutdowns, that was really, really important. And so we did that. And so that's something, again, partnering with the COG, partnering with all our other organizations to make sure the businesses are aware of all the resources that are available. We also are lucky in this community that we have the Small Business Development Center. We have some great people associated with that. And we referred them to that. Our local bankers were part of this. It really was, I think, a community effort to help the businesses get through COVID. And we also had a small business assistance fund that right now, to date, we've funded 43 small programs, projects in the downtown to help businesses survive and get through this. And those dollars have been leveraged 3 to 1. So every dollar that we've put in, they put in 3. And this is for signage, for outdoor seating, for things, infrastructure improvements that help them survive and get through this. So it's been a lot of different people putting in, and that's what's one of those things that both Susan and Priscilla have mentioned, is that we are a resilient community, and we have a lot of people trying to help our community, and that really moves us forward. We're lucky.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we are pushed back a little bit and we are running low on time. So I want to encourage everybody, if we didn't get to you, please email me, education@silvercitymuseum.org. And if you have any other questions for any of our panelists or commentators, and for Miss Susan Berry or any of our scholars, email me and I will pass those along. That's one of the things I love about this program, is that we're able to make connections and keep these conversations going. The program may be ending, but the conversation is not. And so keep it going. Comment on Facebook if you're watching on there. And all of this information is being saved and will give us a little bit of feedback into some exhibits that we have in the works, including our Silver City 101, which will be coming up after. It'll be a while, but we're in the formative phases. We're very excited about it. So I'm going to wrap it up. If anybody has anything that they'd like to add, please do so. You guys?
Thank you all. Thank you, Susan. Thanks, everybody.
Is everybody good? All right. Thank you, everybody. And I want to remind our audience out there to please, if you get a chance, if in your possible, you know what I mean. Donate to www.silvercitymuseumsociety.org/virtual tip jar. You want to take the survey that's going to pop up when you log off. Visit the Silver City Main Street Facebook and website. They do so much for this community, as well as the Council of Governments. Thank you, Priscilla, for being with us today, and for you too, Charmaine. Just some wonderful information. Susan, I loved your presentation, and it is so helpful and amazing to be able to talk about these subjects and have a historical context to place them in. It gives a different perspective than, you know, your normal meeting or conversation on the street, and having your scholarship behind that is awesome. Susan had to cut a lot of what she had been hoping to say from her presentation, but like I said, all of this is being recorded. We will post those sources and her slides on our website at silvercitymuseum.org. So you want to stop by and visit, and we'll get some of that to you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, email me, education@silvercitymuseum.org. I never introduced myself. My name is Erin Griffith. It's nice to meet you all, and have a great day. Thanks.